Why do I get the feeling that I'm going to be comparing this ink to pencil lead again? I'm trying not to be an immediate downer with this ink, I promise. But I want to set some expectations here. Every time I look at a gray ink or a soft black ink, I'm always left feeling like I would have been better off using a pencil. At the top of this video, I'm wondering if this is going to be another one of those times. I hope not, but I've learned to temper my expectations when it comes to this color family. And all that said, let's go through some of the pleasantries and take a look at Diamine Ghost. Longtime viewers of the channel already know my thoughts on these bottles, but if this is your first video here, first, thank you for the view time. Second, I'm not the biggest fan of these 12 ml bottles. It's not the volume that I'm not a fan of, as much as how hard it is to get these narrow openings to work with filling fountain pens. Diamine, if you're watching this, please revisit these smaller bottles and fix this bottle opening. If you can fix that, I'll quit bringing it up, I promise. On the positive side, I was initially going to have some issues with the color on display here on the label, but you'll see here in a few seconds that this ink is not as flat of a gray as I thought it was. So good on you, Diamine. Instead of highlighting the boring part of the ink and just making a gray label, you used the label to give us a good look at what this ink can be. And with that, let's dive into the KPIs and take a look at this ink. First up is this ink blot. If all we ever saw in this ink are the lighter shades here on the right, this ink would be a hard pass. Looking at the left though completely saves this ink. I like the dynamic range on display here from the lighter tones to the darker tones, and the darker this ink becomes, the more of the lavender underlayer with dashes of blue come through. For gray inks, I actually like how these transition tones take this ink from very boring to quite vibrant. Someone's gonna have to comment down below, but I seem to recall Sailor Studio having an ink that came very close to this color profile for its main color, and the name is kind of escaping me as I write the script for this video. Moving past that, next up on the KPIs is the dry time. Starting on Rhodia, this ink is downright phenomenal with a broad nib dry time at under 10 seconds. And moving over to TR, this ink is actually page turn dry by 10 seconds and completely dry at just over 15 seconds. So it's really going to come down to the water test and the writing sample to see if this ink continues to impress or comes up a little bit short. I was going to say that I'm really hoping for the former, but the drawback of writing a script for these videos is that I have to try to replicate my excitement or disappointment when I go back through and record these. So, as you can tell, we've already got quite a bit of color lift as soon as water hits the page. Just seeing this happen, we can tell that this is going to be closer to the disappointment end of the spectrum. And yeah, as I get water off the page, what's left is keeping up with the name of the ink. In fact, I've yet to see a gray ink that leaves a good underlayer, and this one continues that trend. This is one of the faintest ghosting layers that I've seen in an ink review on this channel. So with this in mind, if you want this one in the collection, keep it away from water. And that leaves us with the writing samples, starting this week on Rhodia. The first thing I notice is that Diamine Ghost doesn't really feel like a well-lubricating ink. Most reviews, especially with this particular Kaweco, I find the ink leaving a nice layer for the nib to glide across the page. That layer isn't here. I'm not getting any hard starting from this ink, but I am getting a more narrow line width, and I'm feeling more of the feedback of the nib on the page. So for those in my audience that like a little more feedback when writing, this ink may be a good fit for you. Moving on to the dynamics, it's hard to get a good feel for that until the ink has had a few seconds to dry. I don't know how well this is translating on camera, but this ink goes on rather light, and there are a few seconds, thanks to the color and lack of flow, that you start second guessing if this ink is going to leave a legible layer. When it does dry though, we get a good display of the darker tones. I think with a super wet broad or double broad nib, and with a slow writer, you may be able to get some of those transition tones to come through, but I'm at least happy to see the darker tones come through from this ink. Moving over to TR, the overall feel of the ink does not improve. I'm not used to feeling feedback here, and being able to with this ink is quite a bit of a drawback. So the lubrication is definitely not here, and the flow is a bit stunted on both papers. Additionally, I'm noticing this ink falls a bit flatter here on TR than it does over on Rhodia. Formal script sees more of the lighter mids on display, and when we switch on over to print writing, the ink darkens up just ever so slightly to the shade of gray that I prefer. That does mean, however, that on my paper of choice, I am further from those blue and lavender underlayers than I would like to be, and with an ink that honestly provides less than stellar nib and paper experiences, which, if I'm being honest, takes a gray ink that had so much potential to be a go-to in my collection and turns it into another ink to donate down the road. And that does it for our look at Diamine Ghost. If you liked that video or found it useful, then hit that like button, get subscribed, and I'll see you in the next one.